European leaders are about now arriving at the White House ahead of Ukraine talks with Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump. This is as Volodymyr Zelensky says Vladimir Putin wants to humiliate diplomatic efforts ahead of his meeting with Donald Trump at the White House. Zelensky says several people have been killed in cynical Russian strikes across Ukraine. Read more on the latest on the front line. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and European leaders will join the talks in Washington in a show of unity with Ukraine, where Trump has ruled out Ukraine joining NATO and reclaiming Crimea, illegally annexed by Moscow in 2014, in a future peace deal to end the Russian-Ukraine war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Sunday met with Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, who announced that European and NATO leaders will join the summit.
Achieved through strength. Let me touch upon the main points. First, we must have strong security guarantees to protect both Ukraine and Europe's vital security interests. Ukraine must be able to uphold its sovereignty and its territorial integrity. There can be no limitations on Ukrainian armed forces, be it cooperation with or other third countries or assistance from other third countries, no limitations for the Ukrainian armed forces.
Fiercely, I don't know what Putin and Trump actually discussed. I would like Trump to share many details with me, and then with European leaders. What President Trump told us about a signal regarding security guarantees is much more important to me than Putin's thoughts, because Putin will not give us any security guarantees. A strong army is the only thing that can provide security guarantees. Only Ukraine can provide this. I believe that only Europe can provide funding for his army, and weapons for the army can be provided by our domestic production and European production. But there are SME things that are in short supply and are only available in the United States of America. This, I believe, are security guarantees.
In the meantime, a Russian drone strike on a residential area in Kharkiv overnight killed at least 10 people, including a toddler and a 16-year-old boy, and wounding 20 others, 6 of them children aged between 6 and 17. Ukrainian authorities said the attack was the largest single-night drone strike on the city since August 4th. Rescue teams continue to search the rubble for survivors. The assault coincided with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's planned meetings in Washington with U.S. President Donald Trump. Officials condemned the strike as a deliberate attack on civilians and urged continued international support for Ukraine amid ongoing peace negotiations. Well, and to discuss this in detail, let's hear from international affairs analyst Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Marek, glad to have you join us. What's your thinking in EU leaders, along with von der Leyen, accompanying Zelensky to this meeting with Donald Trump?
Well, there are two aspects to this. First of all, President Zelensky does not want a repeat of the previous time he met President Donald Trump alone, wherein, of course, the shouting match arose, in which President Zelensky overall lost. So he wants that sort of support. Secondly, it's a political signal to show that Europe is standing by Ukraine. He's not alone. And so if he holds out against any demands by President Putin and President Trump, he's not by himself. So it's a political signal. And thirdly, the Europeans themselves wanted to come along because they're worried about their security.
All right. For the EU leaders, first things first, ceasefire before any peace talks. This is an achievable goal, right?
No. President Putin is under no circumstances going to go down that route. The reason is quite simple. Any ceasefire will give an opportunity for Western troops to turn up in Ukraine, and of course for Ukraine itself to regroup. At present, he is advancing. So it's in his favor that there is no ceasefire. It's either a peace treaty or nothing. And indeed, President Donald Trump, since the recent meeting in Alaska, has come around to this viewpoint as well.
Well, Trump, on the other hand, is pressing Zelensky to accept a quick peace deal. What would a quick peace deal be or mean, and in whose interest really? In Trump's or Zelensky's? Mind you, Trump is thinking, what do you call it, Nobel Peace Prize.
Indeed, I think President Trump is thinking about the Nobel Peace Prize because, of course, Obama won it once, above all. But there are other aspects. President Donald Trump is a businessman. He is used to business decisions. When two businessmen meet, it is entirely possible that over lunch, literally over a few hours, fast decisions can be taken. This is not the case in politics. Notably with Russia, and certainly it will also have to be so with Ukraine, because you'll need a constitutional change to carry out Putin's desired peace plan. Therefore, there is no quick deal, however President Donald Trump wants it. And this point will not work. Moreover, there is an aspect of bouncing Ukraine into a deal. It has those sort of overtones. So for all these reasons, no quick deal will come, any more than on Friday when he met President Putin, that there was any immediate decision. There'll be just more talks. He'll put over President Putin's plan, and we'll see what President Zelensky makes of it.
Listen to this. It's a quote from Rubio. If peace is not going to be possible here, and this is just going to continue on as a war, people will continue to die by their thousands. Rubio and Trump seem to be on the same page, strong on peace before ceasefire.
Well, what they really have in mind is they want a quick peace treaty. The ceasefire bit is irrelevant for them. They just want the peace treaty. They prefer a ceasefire, but if President Putin won't do it, they're not going to press him. And so therefore, what we have here simply is that what he is expressing was what President Donald Trump has stated, that if the war continues, people would die. He doesn't like that. He would like a peace treaty. And that's all that really states. It won't actually affect anything one way or the other, his sentence.
Now, when Trump says Zelensky could end the war almost immediately if he wants to, and seemed to be indicating that reclaiming Crimea and joining NATO are off the table for Ukraine, is he not pandering to the wishes of Putin rather than seeking justice?
Well, first of all, you have to question what the word justice means. This is politics. And here what we have is an attack by Russia on Ukraine. However, there was some events leading up to this, the separatist movement in eastern Ukraine, whose demands were met. So it sort of muddies the waters. And there's more to it than that. When you say justice, who is to decide? There is no one in charge in that sense. Moreover, when you say pandering, this is, of course, how the West sees it, or Europeans see it. Actually, we've had 6,000 years of history, and there have been many deals struck over these 6,000 years. It's not necessary simply to think in terms of Chamberlain and Churchill, because that is the underlying, if you like, thought, the mindset of the West. Never again Chamberlain. But there are many, many models of negotiations. And here, all we're really stating is that President Putin has made an offer which has slightly softened his stance compared to his previous one of wanting the whole of Ukraine and not prepared to accept any security guarantees. And now it is up to the Ukrainians to see if they accept it or not.
Marek, interestingly, Mikhail Ulyanov, Russia's envoy to international organizations in Vienna, said Russia agreed that any peace agreement on Ukraine must provide security guarantees to Kyiv. They are on the same page with the EU. This is quite interesting.
Well, it is and it isn't. And see, you must be very careful with Russia. They've been negotiating, and they're very difficult negotiators. Stalin, the Germans said that Stalin was a very, very tough negotiator, and that's just typical of the Russians, frankly. And here we have another example where they thought it through and tried to see what they can offer which will please Trump, but is actually meaningless. And this is an example of it. What does it mean, security guarantees, robust or not? I mean, 1994, the guarantees given to Ukraine were about as robust and clear as you could hope. The USA and Russia and England, though Great Britain, that's the less important, agreed Ukraine's frontiers. They gave guarantees. And 20 odd years afterwards, so what? They've all gone. The same thing would happen to any guarantees. That's why President Putin is prepared to give guarantees, because he knows they're meaningless. They can be torn up tomorrow, and they can always find a cow's belly, which is not that difficult, or invent one, as Hitler did with Gleiwitz when he invented Poland. So my point here is that although a lot is made of security guarantees, and goodness knows why, President Zelensky is so obsessed with them, the fact of the matter is the only guarantee is, will America support Ukraine militarily should Russia attack again? That's the key one.
Yeah, apart from that being the key, what you're invariably saying is that Putin and the Russians cannot be trusted.
So, absolutely. Russians are not partners with whom you can certainly say that whatever they put their pen to today, that a few years down the road they won't change their mind. That is absolutely the case. But that does not preclude a peace treaty. It does not preclude the fact Ukraine can recover. It does not preclude making a peace treaty with terms which Ukraine might find palatable. And we must go back, I think, again to Poland, which has made 19 peace treaties with Russia. It is, of course, a point the Poles make. The Russians have broken all 19 of them, including 3 eternal ones. On the other hand, they were treaties for some time. The 1921 treaty, whereby Poland and Russia secured after World War I a frontier, worked up to World War II. The same thing could work for Ukraine. They could have easily, years on end, the Russians need not necessarily attack. In fact, according to my books, what I've written, it won't be Ukraine they attack next, it will be Poland. However, that's by the by. The point here is that a peace treaty, at least for some time, is something to be looked at. And this is the problem. Zelensky is thinking in apocalyptic terms, that it's a now or never, set into stone.
Marek, just a wee bit, I'm going to get back to you. Zelensky has just arrived at the White House. That is him standing there with the President of the United States, Donald Trump, for their scheduled meeting, of course, which the EU leaders have come along with him to prevent what happened earlier in February, where Zelensky was kind of humiliated by Trump and his Vice President, J.D. Vance. All right, that's the live visuals you're watching there. Back to you, Marek. Now, let me ask you this. In the event that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, how does both Trump and the EU guarantee, if there's anything like that, that Putin will abide by the dotted lines of whatever agreement is reached?
No such possibility exists. This is media fodder. This is just a way of bringing about a peace treaty. As I stated, just to finish off, some sort of peace treaty can be made which will give Ukraine peace for some time, but there's no permanent peace treaty. It does not exist in this world, and certainly not with Russia. Incidentally, your footage now, if I may comment on it very quickly, notice the difference between how President Zelensky is greeted and President Putin. It's quite clear where President Donald Trump's sympathies lie. No red carpet. It's a little point, of course, but all these little points matter so much. Not even to his car. If you look carefully on the screen right now, you'll see there's nothing like that. And so, therefore, this in itself shows that the negotiations between President Putin and President Trump were on a different level to what President Trump and Zelensky. There is no meeting of equals between President Trump and President Zelensky, whereas that was the impression given when he met President Putin. These are very important signals, and in their own, they show that the negotiations that are about to take place now will be rather one-sided, I'm afraid.
That's quite a pity, because Putin is the aggressor in this war. I mean, the world knows that. But EU leaders said no discussions over territory could take place without Kiev's involvement and clear arrangements to safeguard the rest of Ukraine's land.
Yeah, well, they'll obviously make these arrangements, but they're quite meaningless. The only thing will save Ukraine, as I said, that actually Russia's going to attack Poland next, according to my books, and not, in fact, Ukraine. However, the key point here is, and this is very important, they'll have to change the constitution in some way. They'll have to, because in effect, Ukraine is one and indivisible, like the 1905 Russian constitution. And they're going to have to do something about that. And they have to go through Ukraine parliament and so on. There is no question of a quick deal. And there's no question of it not being examined over and over again. What is important is these talks are taking place. And so there is some possibility of some peace treaty. And that is about the best we can say at present. But clearly, President Trump wants President Zelensky to cede land.
On security guarantees, could Zelensky rely on the U.S. to deliver on some NATO Article 5 type promise to defend Ukraine if Russia breaches any peace agreement?
I have bad news for you on that one. Article 5 is a piece of fiction, more or less. It says there that, of course, and this is the thing you're thinking about, how an attack on one nation will be an attack on all, and this is obviously what Poles believe in particular, whereas what it actually goes on to say is, and the nations, the other ones that is, shall therefore take action as they see fit. Now, that means that they don't have to actually do anything. Now, this is the point that's going to occur soon, because assuming the Ukrainian conflict is brought to an end, then in fact, with the attack on Poland, the Poles will be, unfortunately, have an unpleasant surprise that as in 1939, they're going to be by themselves. Therefore, extrapolating back to Ukraine, which is the point of your question, yes, Putin doesn't mind them having a clause 5. If it's written like clause 5, there's a get out for all the other nations, in particular USA, which does not see this as its war, does not want to take place, and does not want to really help. It's quite prepared to sell arms, by the way, and that's about the limit.
Now, look, all right, Marek, I'll get back to you. Looks like, while we're watching feeds from America, Trump and Zelensky there, Trump speaking, I think the meeting has even started in the White House. Just to reiterate that Trump calls Zelensky immediately after the meeting with Putin, and just like he said, he got across to EU leaders as well that he will be meeting with Zelensky.
Thank you, and using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States. She sent a letter to Putin about our children, abducted children, and my wife, First Lady of Ukraine, she gave the letter. It's not to you, to your wife.
Oh, I want it.
Yeah. So we are saying this sensitive topic, yes, please. And thanks to our partners, and that you supported this format, that after our meeting we can have leaders who are around us, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Finland, EU, NATO, I mean all partners around Ukraine supporting us. Thanks to them, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you very much for being here.
President Trump.
Do you think it's fair?
Yes, Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, President Trump. So, President Zelensky, you say in a post on X today, Russia must end this war, which it itself started. President Trump, you say President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to. Which is it?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we're going to have a meeting. I think if everything works out well today, we'll have a trilat. And I think there will be a reasonable chance of ending the war when we do that.
And is this the end of the road for American support for Ukraine? Is today's meeting deal or no deal?
I can never say that. It's never the end of the road. People are being killed and we want to stop that. So I would not say it's the end of the road. No, I think we have a good chance of doing it. It's been almost 4 years now that a lot of people were killed last week. A lot of people last week. I mean, millions of people killed, but a lot of people last week for whatever reason. A big number, a lot of soldiers, on both sides. And I know the president, I know myself, and I believe Vladimir Putin wants to see it ended.
And as you met with Putin on Friday, today you've got President Zelensky here. As you listen to Russia and Ukraine, which side has the better cards? Right
Well,
now?
I don't want to say that. I'm just here to be, look, this isn't my war. This is Joe Biden's war. He's the one that had a lot to do with this happening, and we want to get it ended. And we want it to end good for everybody. We want it to end good. The people of Ukraine have suffered incredibly.
And to that point, President Zelensky, are you prepared to keep sending Ukrainian troops to their deaths for another couple years, or are you going to agree to redraw the maps?
Thank you for your question. So, first of all, we live under each day attacks. That today have been a lot of attacks and a lot of wounded people, and the child was dead, small one year and a half. So we need to stop this war, to stop Russia, and we need support American and European partners. And we will do our best for this. So, and I think we show that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war. And we are ready for trilateral, as President said. This is a good signal about trilateral. I think this is very good. Thank you.
Mr. President,
if the peace deal will be achieved, are you going to be willing to send American peacekeepers to Ukraine?
Well, we're going to work with Ukraine. We're going to work with everybody, and we're going to make sure that if there's peace, the peace is going to stay long-term. This is very long-term. We're not talking about a 2-year peace and then we end up in this mess again. We're going to make sure that everything's good. We'll work with Russia. We're going to work with Ukraine. And we're going to make sure it works. And I think if we can get to peace, it's going to work. I have no doubt about it.
Your team has talked about security guarantees. Could that involve U.S. troops? Would you roll that out in the future?
We'll let you know that maybe later today. We're meeting with 7 great leaders of great countries also, and we'll be talking about that. They'll all be involved, but there'll be a lot of they are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe. But we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved.
Mr. President, Vladimir Putin mentioned that the war will not end without addressing the root causes of this war. Have you had an understanding what are the root causes of this war?
Well, look, the war is going to end. When it ends, I can't tell you, but
All right, that was Zelensky and Trump there discussing, answering questions from journalists. Trump took quite a lot of questions. He said, never the end of the road. Yeah, I still have. Mark, I'll just get to you in a bit when I reel out some of the things that Trump said and what Zelensky said. Maybe have you make sense of what you heard there from both leaders. Trump says never the end of the road. We have a good chance of doing this. I believe Putin wants to see it end. I don't know what the EU leaders will be thinking about that and what you two will be thinking about that. For Zelensky, just the one question that he was asked, he said, we need to stop this war. All right, over to you, Marek. What do you make of, what's your sense of what you heard, and not just what you heard, but the body language is very important, you know, when you watch people speak in a meeting. Marek.
Well, the first important thing, if we can start on body language, is that his body language is stiffer with Zelensky than with Putin, which repeats what I said previously, that the meeting with Vladimir Putin was on a different level. However, that is not the fundamental issue here. The one is, has President Donald Trump stated anything new? Well, actually, he's repeated his key points. He likes the war to end. That, number two, he keeps making vague comments that he's prepared to help Ukraine afterwards in a security sense, but he's not actually given any details. And it depends what that means. Does it mean just supply Starlink to them? It's very unclear. That's not clear now. Thirdly, he has made it quite clear he doesn't see that as his war, but on the other hand, he's not going to straight away walk away from it. He was very guarded also about making any comment before the meeting, which was very correctly diplomatic of him. And so what we have at present is that the meeting will take place in as pleasant an atmosphere as is possible between Donald Trump and President Zelensky. President Zelensky, for his part, I think missed the opportunity to state precisely how committed he is to Ukraine's territories not being ceded, which is interesting because up till now he's been quite clear, and now for the first time he only answered on minor points. If you like, he didn't make the main point. And I'm wondering whether that implies there's some flexibility in his thinking.
I'm sorry, I have to interject there. We're going back to the live feed coming from the White House on the meeting between Trump and Zelensky. I'll get back to you afterwards.
Yeah, looks good. That's the one that attacked you last time. See, now he's in.
I remember that. Yeah, I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
In the same suit. You see, I changed. You are not.
Maybe yours is much better. Real quickly, upon peace, God willing we get peace, are you open to holding an election in your country?
Yes, of course. We are open for election, yes. We have to do safety circumstances, and a little bit we need to work in the parliament, because during the war you can't have elections, but we can do security. We need, maybe, how to say, we need a truth, yes, everywhere, in the battlefield, in the sky, in the sea, yeah, to make possible for people to do democratic, open, legal elections.
So you say during the war you can't have elections. So let me just say 3.5 years from now, so you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody, no more elections. Oh, that's good. I wonder what the fake
news like this idea?
Yeah. No. Speaking of news, I got a question for you. This sounds insane for me even to ask this, but do you think the American media really doesn't even want a peace deal because they've been so critical of you every step of the way as you lead the charge for peace?
It's an amazing phenomenon. I said that if in the settlement you got Moscow, St. Petersburg, and thousands of miles around them, they would say, I made a bad deal. The level of hatred and animosity is incredible. Not with all. I mean, we have great people up here. We also have terrible people up there that I think are told what to say. But, you know, in solving all of these wars, they don't even write about it. You know, I saw major wars. I saw wars that have been going on for 31, 35, and 37, and a couple of quicker ones. One that was going to go into a full-blown deal very quickly. You know what the one I'm talking about. It was a big one. But they don't even write about that. No matter what I do, no matter what, and you know, this is not anything to do with you. It's probably to your advantage in a certain way. But no matter what I do, no matter what deal I make, from my standpoint, you'll come out good. Maybe President Putin will come out good. But they'll say, Trump was absolutely horrible. It's just that, and I've lived with that for a long time. I've lived with it since just before the first election. I used to get great publicity. Now I get the worst publicity anyone's ever gotten in office, but I won in a landslide, so that people understand. They're the only ones that count, ultimately. But I've also had great reporters. I've had journalists that are very good. But it's very sad when you do the right thing. As an example, they said, because of the fact that Vladimir Putin came to American soil, this was a tremendous defeat for Donald Trump. No, it was really wonderful that he did it. It was a hard thing for him to do, to be honest with you. It was the opposite of what they said, but they said it. Now, if he didn't come, they'd say that was also bad for Trump. You know, There's no way. And there's just a great dishonesty of the press, and I think that's why it's lost its credibility. You know, its credibility is at an all-time low. We have a thing going on right now in D.C. We went from the most unsafe place anywhere to a place that now friends are calling me up, Democrats are calling me up, and they're saying, sir, I want to thank you. My wife and I went out to dinner last night for the first time in 4 years, and Washington, D.C. is safe, and you did that in 4 days. I'll tell you, it's safe. I had another friend of mine, he has a son who's a great golfer, he's on tour, and he came in 4th yesterday in the big tournament where Scotty Scheffler made the great shot, and he said his son is going to dinner in Washington, D.C. tonight. I said, would you have allowed that to happen a year ago? He said, no way, no way. He said, what you've done is incredible. And I think the people realize it. But the press says, he's a dictator, he's trying to take over. No, all I want is security for our people. But people that haven't gone out to dinner in Washington, D.C. in 2 years are going out to dinner. And the restaurants the last 2 days were busier than they've been in a long time. Thank you.
I walked around yesterday with MTG. If you can walk around with DC with MTG and not be attacked, the city is safe.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week you warned of what you called severe consequences if a 30-day ceasefire or any type of ceasefire were not agreed to by Russia. Will there be severe consequences? Does that change because of
I don't think you need a ceasefire. You know, if you look at the 6 deals that I settled this year, they were all at war. I didn't do any ceasefires. And I know that it might be good to have, but I can also understand strategically why, well, you know, one country or the other wouldn't want it. You have a ceasefire and they rebuild and rebuild and rebuild, and, you know, maybe they don't want that. But if you look at the 6 deals that we made peace, and you know, long-term, long-running wars, I didn't do any ceasefires. Would I like the concept, you know, I like the concept of a ceasefire for one reason, because you'd stop killing people immediately, as opposed to in 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever it takes. But we can work a deal where we're working on a peace deal while they're fighting. They have to fight. I wish they could stop. I'd like them to stop. But strategically, that could be a disadvantage for one side or the other. But all of these deals I made without even the mention of the words ceasefire.
President Zelensky,
can you explain the decision to offer Ukraine Article 5-like security guarantees, but stop short of pushing for their full membership?
Yeah, well, we haven't done anything on that yet. If you look back and you go back long before President Putin, it was always a statement that they would never allow Ukraine into NATO. So that was a statement that was made, but we haven't discussed any of that yet. We're going to be discussing it today. But we will give them very good protection, very good security. That's part of it. And the people that are waiting for us, they are, I think they're very like-minded. They want to help out all.
Thank you, President. Thank you, President Trump.
Are you disappointed there's no ceasefire, Mr. President?
The United States has already given hundreds of billions of dollars to this war effort in Ukraine. At best, it is a stalemate, and the killing continues. So, President Trump, how much more is the United States willing to give Ukraine? And President Zelensky, how much more do you want?
Well, I'll start off just by saying we're not giving anything now. We're selling weapons. This is something before, I guess the number is well over $300 billion. That was under Joe Biden, a corrupt politician, not a smart man, never was. By the way, go back 40 years, he was not a smart man 40 years ago either, but now he's in particular bad. This was done by a corrupt administration that shouldn't have been in, and frankly, if the right results of the election were given, if I were president, this war would have never taken place, and he would have been very happy, because he would have liked to have seen. I mean, they went through hell. He went through hell. This war would have never happened, and the people that were killed, a couple of million people, a lot of people with soldiers and everything else, and the people that have been displaced and forced into other areas and other countries because of what's happened, none of that would have happened. And I'm just saying that he was a horrible president, whether it was the borders or this, he was just a horrible, corrupt president.
Mr. President,
you want to?
I can. Thank you so much. So first of all, we have possibility now to buy weapon from the United States. We are thankful for this program and this opportunity. We are thankful for Europe. They pay for this. And through NATO program, for example, Pearl and etc., we have some programs where we can have some money to finance this. And this is a part, I think, it's not a part for the war and to defend us. It also will be a part for security guarantees, to strengthen our army, to rearm Ukrainian army. This is very, very important. And it depends how much money we need to rearm. For example, the question of air defense, we spoke about it with President Trump, and I'm happy that we have now bilateral decisions and we work on it with production, American production. Nobody in Europe has so many air defense like Patriots, for example.
Just to give you a little bit of what you've heard, what you've been watching, President Zelensky, the one now speaking just a while ago, he was saying that he was asked about election. He said, yes, to election, there'll be election, but of course then it's dependent on the fact that there is a war now, so you can't have a war when there is, you can't have election rather, when there is a war going on. I mean, the security implications, disorganization, so that won't be possible, according to Zelensky. He also thanked, Trump and the EU for this program, talking about whether they will have weapons or finance, to execute the war. So he thanked Trump, thanked the Americans for this program, thanked the EU also for the support they have given, and that this talk is even going on at all. While on the part of Trump, he delved into, I think somebody asked him a question about the fact that the fact of the National Guards being sent to places like Washington without even the authorization or otherwise. I mean, there's a question of the constitutionality of that because you have to route it through the governors of the states, but Trump just sent the guards there, and then he was speaking there about the fact that he talked about according to him, what he called dishonesty of the press. That is according to Trump. And then he said a Democrat and his wife, both of them called him and said Washington is now safe, according to them, according to what Trump said, because of what Trump said. All right, we'll take you back to that discussion between Trump and Zelensky at the White House.
Secure form. So between paper ballots, very, very important, paper ballots, and I think maybe even more important, the mail-in voting. We're going to end mail-in voting. It's a fraud. If you have mail-in vote, even Jimmy Carter with this commission, they set it up. He said the one thing about mail-in voting, you will never have an honest election if you have mail-in. And it's time that the Republicans get tough and stop it, because the Democrats want it. It's the only way they can get elected. Because with men and women's sports and with transgender for everybody and open borders and all of the horrible things, and now the new thing is they love crime. They're fighting me on the fact that I've made Washington, D.C. safe. We're not going to get mugged, beaten up, or killed like all the people you've been watching get so badly hurt. I'm glad, I hate to take your time with this, but I'm glad you asked me that question. Sorry. We're going to stop mail-in ballots because it's corrupt. You know, when you go to a voting booth and you do it the right way and you go to a state that runs it properly, you go in, they even ask me, they asked me for my license plate, for identity. I said, I don't know if I have it. They said, sir, you have to have it. I was very impressed, actually. But it's very hard to cheat with mail-in voting. As you know what happens in California, it's so corrupt, where some people get 5, 6, 7 ballots delivered to them. Now, we got to stop mail-in voting, and the Republicans have to lead the charge. The Democrats want it because they have horrible policy. If you have mail-in voting, you're not going to have many Democrats get elected. That's bigger than anything having to do with redistricting, believe me. And the Republicans have to get smart. We're not going to have a country. I said for a long time at rallies, you need borders, and you need free and fair elections. Those two things, otherwise you don't have. We have strong borders now. In 90 days, Mr. President, we didn't have 0 in 3 months. Not one person came in illegally into our country. In fact, even I find that hard to believe, but it's run by a little bit of a liberal group that put out the numbers, so I guess it's, but 0, 0, and 0. You go back a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 millions of people poured into our country. It was terrible. Thank you very much.
What security guarantees do you need from President Trump to be able to make a deal? Is it American troops, intelligence, equipment? What is it?
Everything. And really, it includes two parts. First, strong Ukrainian army. That's what I began to discuss with your colleagues. And it's a lot about weapon and then people and training missions and intelligence. And second, we will discuss with our partners. It depends on the big countries, on the United States, on a lot of our friends.
And Mr. President, are you willing to commit American troops to that NATO-like protection in order to get President Zelensky to a deal today?
Well, I don't know if you define it that way, but NATO-like, I mean, we have people waiting in another room right now. They're all here from Europe, biggest people in Europe, and they want to give protection. They feel very strongly about it, and we'll help them out with that. I think it's very important. I think it's very important to get the deal done.
You've been involved with the peacekeeping in Ukraine since your first day in the administration. What would you say to the Ukrainian people right now who are suffering under the Russian attacks and hoping that the American people will stand with them?
Well, I know Ukrainian people. I've known many over the years. They're great people. They're smart. They're energetic. They love their country. I mean, they love their country, and we want to get this war ended. That's all I can do. I love the Ukrainian people, but I love all people. I love the Russian people. I love them all. I want to get the war stopped. Very important.
Mr. President, was there any aspect of your discussion with Vladimir Putin that left you disappointed?
Look, we just spoke to, I was just telling the President, I just spoke to President Putin indirectly, and we're going to have a phone call right after these meetings today. And we may or may not have a trilat. If we don't have a trilat, then the fighting continues. And if we do, we have a good chance. I think if we have a trilat, there's a good chance of maybe ending it. But he's expecting my call when we're finished with this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's go, guys. Thank you. Thank you, press. Let's go. Let's go. Move. Come on, guys. Let's go.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, press. Thank you. Keep moving.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Keep moving quickly. Let's go.
Thanks, guys. Keep going.
All right. Well, he just witnessed the end of the meeting between Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and Trump, Donald Trump, the U.S. president. Of course, you heard him say there that he'll be meeting with the EU leaders who are there, Macron of France, Merz of Germany, Keir Starmer of UK, and some of the other leaders are right there to give support to Zelensky. Let me just reiterate some of the things that they said. Trump was speaking lastly there about the fact that you need borders and free and fair elections. And then I think someone asked him about the question of mail-in voting. He's against mail-in voting. He feels that Democrats won't be elected into power if they continue with mail-in voting. That mail-in voting is corrupt, according to him, and he's saying that Republicans should do the smart thing and end mail-in voting. Whether that occurs or not is another ball game altogether. Then he described California as corrupt. They are very corrupt. He said, you know what happened in California? They are very corrupt. The same thing, the same word he used to describe Biden. And he has continually kept on saying that this war is Biden's war. Well, I guess everyone knows that Putin was the one, is the aggressor. He started this war, but he keeps saying that if he were there, the war wouldn't happen. You remember that Trump said, even before he gets into power, that the war will end, but we are more than 6 months into his administration. The war is still on, even though, of course, moves are being made to get the war to end from both sides, Putin and, of course, Zelensky. He also talked about, like I just said earlier, about the guards he sent to Washington. According to him, Democrats that's mainly voting. Democrats are criticizing him, but then that a particular Democrat and the wife called him and said, now we can go to events. Thank you for what you did in Washington. Now the place is safe, that he has made it safe. These were some of the comments that Trump made in answer to some of the questions that the press were asking him there. Then let me just get to Zelensky, one or two things that Zelensky said. He talked about, they asked him, what do you want? And he said, well, everything for peace, everything for peace. And he said, weapons, we need that for Ukraine security, training from both partners and friends, that Ukraine depends on the U.S., and of course friends of the U.S. to help do this. That's why you have, talking about friends, it was of course talking about EU leaders who are there to help support him concerning this meeting. His body language he looks quite confident. He looks quite relaxed, unlike last time when Trump and his vice president hassled him. All right, that's it. That's the meeting between Trump. If I will go back to the top and just reiterate some of the comments, because most of the questions anyway were directed at Trump. He's the one trying to get the truth, the peace in this. Never the end of the road. I mean, to a statement from a journalist, he said, never. You can never say that. Never the end of the road. We have a good chance of doing it, and the world is really waiting, because so many thousands of lives have been lost in Ukraine, on the other side too of Russia, but mostly in Ukraine. Lands have been taken, Donetsk, Crimea have been taken, and then the question, of course, of ceding land. I didn't particularly hear anything about that, except in this, I guess, either it wasn't raised or they were just being diplomatic. We have a good chance of doing it. I believe Putin wants to see it end. This isn't my war. He says it's Joe Biden's war. We're going to work with both the Russian and the Ukraine to end it. Just the other day, he received, that was what Marek was talking about, the difference between how Putin was received and how Zelensky was received. And, well, like late Hadley Chase would say in one of his novels, this is the way the cookie crumbles. And Marek was talking about the fact that what is even justice in international circles, you know, where even the U.S. is not particular. By the way, Putin is being accused for war crimes, and he got this red carpet in America. You know, these are talks you keep on hearing across the globe, across the world, in international fora, in diplomatic circles. This isn't my war, it's Joe Biden's war. We're going to work with both Russia and Ukraine to end it. We'll be meeting with the EU leaders. That's where they are going to now, immediately afterwards. All right, I have Marek Laskiewicz. Marek, glad to know that you're still there. Thank you, by the way. Let me just say one or two things before you come in, and what you make of it, what's your sense of the things you heard. He talked about Washington, he talked about the guards and the fact that it's Biden's war. I don't know whether you agree with that. And then, of course, he talked about we're not giving anything, we're giving weapons, you know, when asked that. He went on to say we're going to end mail-in voting. I mean, this is America thing, not Ukraine Putin thing now, and how that the guards have probably made Washington more secure, according to Trump. And then he talked about the borders and fair elections. On Zelensky's side, Zelensky said thanks for the program for EU, and how that for peace to reign, you would need his partners, which are the EU who are supporting him, right, their leaders. He said this depends on our friends and, of course, weapons and then training. What do you make of the whole gamut of what you witnessed, Marek?
3 points. First and foremost, I state again that the meeting is about as pleasant as you could hope for as an entrance now to go meeting the EU and Ukraine and negotiating. This is as pleasant and as opening as one could possibly have hoped for. Number two, Zelensky made a good gesture by replying to the letter, because Melanie Trump had written, of course, the letter about the children. And there was a point which arose, which was on the other hand negative for Zelensky, but I think it's not going to be vital, namely about the business of elections, because President Donald Trump underlined that some sort of election should take place. That was the point of his comment. Second.
Go.
Yes.
Just to chip in, but how do you hold elections in a state of terror, of insecurity, of bombings here and there? I don't see how elections are going to hold, Marek. I don't see how.
Actually, elections, and here comes the difficult point, were held, for example, during the American Civil War. Now, in the American Civil War, very vital elections indeed, Lincoln was returned to power and the North went on to win. So in Donald Trump's mind, and that's, I think, one of the key points, it simply isn't true that you can't have elections. If I remember correctly, there's even a question of when Roosevelt died, whether that was, you could argue that wasn't an opportune moment for Truman, and there should have been, and the whole point about elections during the war and so on, it can be done. The question is, should it be done? And it is a very clear point that Donald Trump is making. And this is what one of the points that President Putin has said, that he's not there for the elected leader. Now, owing to the Ukrainian constitution, they can't be held. But this is not a strong point in Ukraine's favor. And this is what Donald Trump was underlying. So they can be held. The question is, should they be? And the point is, they're not going to be held. And if the war continues for some time, then they still won't be held, and President Zelensky will remain in power. That is what Donald Trump was underlining.
Yeah, but I mean, this are not the best. Now and then are not the same, and this is Donald Trump's mind, and this is Zelensky's mind, and arguments to and fro will go about that. Trump also, just a bit before then I let you go, what do you make of what Trump said about I think you've alluded to the fact that a letter was brought. That was a very calming moment, a letter from Zelensky's wife, which you've talked about, to it had a good effect on Trump, to Trump's wife, and he made a point of telling Trump, this is not your letter, it's actually to your wife. And then there was quite a little bit of laughter between Trump, Zelensky, and of course the people seated there.
Yeah, that went down very well. That was a very good move by President Zelensky. It went down very well. It was one of those which helped the atmosphere. As I say, the business of elections isn't fundamental. Equally, Donald Trump went on about it as being Joe Biden's war. This isn't fundamental. He touched on the fact he gets a very bad press, which indeed he does. That's President Donald Trump. However, it's not going to put him off. He made that quite clear. And he also made it quite clear that he is going to listen to what President Zelensky is going to state, because he underlined the fact that America is interested in giving some sort of security guarantees. The details are missing, but then there probably should be at this point, because we're talking about general principles. So it was a very good opening meeting between President Donald Trump and President Zelensky, and the press conference went as well as it possibly could.
Yeah, of course, between your first impression matters. There you are just seeing. I will leave you there. Thank you so much, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, international analyst all the way from London, trying to piece these things together. Thank you so much, Marek. But there you were just a bit, you were just watching protest for Ukraine. That's it, you're just watching the protest. But at this juncture, you've been watching the world with me, Ndi Amuko. Please keep it here on Arise News and from the entire team here in Abuja and around the world. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.